Welcome. Welcome to the Worcester Senior Center Stay Connected programming. This will air on channel 192, the government station. Today we welcome Dr. Sabato, who is a career emergency physician from the University of Massachusetts Medical School, who has served as the Emergency Room Director, Emergency Public Health Director, American College of Emergency Medicine Section Director, and Chairman of the National Association of EMS Physicians Committee Chair, and currently serves as the Local 911 Medical Director, and has been dedicated to resuscitation medicine for the past 16 plus years. He is also leading the effort to save lives in Massachusetts. Dr. Sabato grew up in Massachusetts and attended Boston University and UMass Medical School. He is a member of the Holden Senior Center and has been teaching bystander CPR for a long time. Dr. Sabato has helped save several lives. Welcome, Dr. Sabato.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I started at UMass Medical School 47 years ago. And my first rotations, because they hadn't built the hospital yet, were right up the street here at St. Vincent's Hospital with that. So I go back a long way with things. And I grew up in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. And one of the things I love to do outside of medicine is I'm a runner. And when I was at the University of Florida for 10 years, before I came back to the University of Massachusetts 6 years ago, I was also the disaster medical director. And the disaster medical director would be the person who would be over the medical director for big events. And so in Florida, one of the big events was the National 15K Championship road race. And so I always followed what the Boston Marathon was up to from a medical standpoint. And one of the things that they started doing 10 years ago was teaching CPR at the expo, because people who collapse in road races, it's the time from when they collapse to getting CPR that makes a difference in whether they have a chance to survive. But I decided I was going to jump ahead of the Boston Marathon, because our race in Jacksonville at that time was a month before the Boston Marathon. So me, the nurses, the residents, we taught CPR at that race in March of 2013. And then I ran the race. And when I ran the race, halfway through the race, this woman was shooing people away that someone had collapsed. So I went around her, and I go over to where there were two gentlemen. They turned out they were Jacksonville paramedics that were running the race. They were doing CPR on this guy, so I joined in with them. And I kept checking for a pulse. He had no pulse, but he would wake up during the CPR. That's how good their CPR was. The defibrillator comes, because he was in ventricular fibrillation, which is the most common rhythm that causes people to collapse. We shocked him, and he woke up, and he said, "I want to finish the race." Oh. And I said, "No, you are not. You are getting in the back of that ambulance and going to the hospital." And what happened was, a couple of days later, one of the techs at the hospital stops me in the hallway, and he goes, "That guy says he knows me." "What guy?" "The guy you saved the other day." I said, "Oh, okay. He wants to talk to you." I said, "Okay, give him my phone number." So he took all of the Good Samaritans that saved his life out to dinner. And he gave us all plaques honoring us for doing that with things. And he became the poster child for all the races in Jacksonville, and they all started teaching CPR at all of the races, which is what we should be doing everywhere, because it's a great opportunity to teach people, but also it saves lives. So, and then when I came back to Massachusetts 6 years ago, I volunteered to become the 911 medical director. I was doing that down in Florida. And when I came back here, I asked, what's our survival rate for cardiac arrest? They were not keeping any data on that, even throughout the state. When they handed me the data, I almost fell out of my chair. Our survival in our region, and it's typical of the whole state, is 3% versus a national average of 10% and a best practice of Seattle of 60%. And so my personal goal has been, so I'm allegedly in retirement, but my personal goal has been to convert Massachusetts into the Seattle of the East, but with better weather. And we have been teaching the CPR, and I've been working to fix the Massachusetts system, working with legislators like Harriet Chandler. And I got the attention of Maura Healey. And she said she's going to sign the legislation that I worked with the Heart Association on, and we will save 500 lives in Massachusetts every year once that's enacted. So, and the key thing, one of the key things is, and the interesting thing is that somebody from UMass, Dr. Rob Goldberg, an epidemiologist, has been proposing that we teach people with risk factors for cardiac arrest, their family and friends, CPR, so they know what to do, because 70% of cardiac arrests occur at home before family and friends. So he's been proposing to do this for 40 years. And when I came back to UMass and started the program at UMass, UMass is now teaching this to the people at risk on the inpatient floors. I went to his office, and he said, "You're Joe?" I said, "Yeah." He gets up, comes over to me, gives me a big hug, and he says, "For 40 years I've been advocating this, and you're the first person to listen to me." But we're all going to change that and save lives. You all have the handouts? Everybody got a handout? Okay. So when somebody collapses and they have a cardiac arrest, it's usually due to a heart rhythm problem that causes the muscle to stop contracting. And so what you do if you have somebody at home or in a place wherever you are with things, is you shake them to see if they'll wake up. They won't wake up. You want to make sure you call 911, but you don't hold things, call 911 so that you can start EMS to be coming to help. But what you do is then start CPR, which is pushing down in the center of the chest. How many of you know the song Staying Alive? Staying alive, staying alive. That's the right rhythm for this with things, at a rate of about 100 to 120. And releasing, remembering to release, because sometimes people push down and they kind of forget to release, and the releasing is very important because that's what allows the heart to refill in doing that. You are pushing on the heart and compressing the heart so it empties, and it fills the blood vessels and continues to give circulation to the brain and to the heart, and that's what keeps somebody alive. All right? And then when you shock them and it converts it into a normal rhythm, then it takes over from there with things. But otherwise, the circulating the blood helps keep the person alive until they can be converted into a normal rhythm. That keeps the person alive until EMS gets there. And if you're in a place like the senior center that has a defibrillator, you send somebody to get the defibrillator. And the defibrillator, when the defibrillator comes, if people bare the skin on the chest, okay? So, and put the pads on. You want to put the pads on bare skin because it won't work through clothing, and 2, we don't want a fire, which is what will happen when you shock somebody if you don't have it on bare skin. And the pads tell you where to put them. One on the right shoulder and the other one on the left side of the chest. So the heart is in the middle of it. So when it's shocked, the charge goes through the heart in the right direction.
Do you want questions as you go along? Do you want questions as you go along?
I'm sorry?
Should I interrupt you with a question?
No, I'm
as
sure I can handle interruptions. There's no problem.
I go to the Y, and there's a defibrillator there.
Mm-hmm.
When you open it up, are those individual pieces, or what is it once you open it up?
It's like this with the pads and the defibrillator. And so once you put the pads on, you turn the defibrillator on. And the defibrillator will walk you
Analyzing
through
heart
what
rhythm.
to do.
Do not touch the patient.
So you don't interfere with the interpretation.
Shock advised. Charging. Stay clear of patient.
So you don't get shocked by accident.
Deliver shock now. Press shock delivered. Begin CPR.
You turn the defibrillator on as soon as you put the pads on. And so within about 30 seconds, it'll tell you if the person needs to be shocked. And then you restart CPR otherwise. And even after you shock the person, you restart CPR because it can take a minute or two after someone's shocked and converted into a normal rhythm before the heart actually starts contracting and pumping blood. So that's why you restart CPR. And then the great thing is always when you are successful and the person wakes up and pushes you away. That I look forward to that when that happens. It really is wonderful that you can save somebody's life with that. Okay? So there's 3 things. One is calling 911. And one of the things I teach people is you call 911, you tell them that the person's in cardiac arrest and that you've started CPR, but don't go through answering 27 questions if you're the only person to do CPR. Don't do anything that stops CPR. As long as they have the address and they're sending the rescue team there, the most important thing is to keep CPR going in that. And don't get derailed to answer stupid questions that are irrelevant to saving somebody's life. All right? So that's part of my battle in Massachusetts, is to get rid of those irrelevant questions and get us to the national standard where from the start of the 911 call to the CPR instructions is 90 seconds, which is what we should be doing. Okay? How many of you have learned CPR before? Okay. Well, it's much simpler now with what we call hands-only CPR, because we don't have rescue breathing as part of it unless it's a drowning, strangulation, or an overdose. Other than that, and most cardiac arrests are just cardiac arrests, you just do the hands-only CPR, and that makes all the difference in the world in keeping somebody alive until they can get shocked. Okay? You call 911. You ask for the defibrillator to get sent. The defibrillator arrives. You open it. You put the pads on, as I demonstrated. Turn on the defibrillator. Follow its instructions. You shock somebody, and then you restart doing CPR until they wake up. And one of the key things, and this is the thing I mentioned about Dr. Goldberg having recognized the risk factors of things besides age and potential or history of heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, elevated cholesterol and triglycerides, family history of sudden death, and seizure disorders are all things that put people at higher risk for cardiac arrest. And we're in the process now at UMass of teaching everybody that offering this to everybody that has the risk factors, so they know what to do, and as well as their family and friends. And I met with Mayor Petty now a couple of times on this, and the first thing I said to Mayor Petty, and he was all in favor of this, was I said, wouldn't it be nice, Mayor Petty, if the city that has a heart as its symbol became the best practice example for New England on how to handle heart disease? He loved it, and he's been one of my best supporters in moving this forward since then with that. And when he called me a month ago, and he said to me that when he got elected state senator, that he and I are going to spread this throughout Massachusetts, which is great. So, one of the things that I would like to have the senior center look at is when I got to UMass, and one of the medical students came to me. She had worked at a hospital before she got into medical school, and they got called to a cardiac arrest in the parking garage, and they couldn't find the defibrillator. So she was very interested in improving the signage so people could find defibrillators on the UMass campus, and it was very confusing when I first got there. And so she did that as her capstone project. All the medical students are required to do a capstone project to graduate. And she came to me because she wanted to go into emergency medicine, and she's now, I think, in her second year of emergency medicine residency. And one of the things that happened was I had a list of all the defibrillators on campus at UMass. And I sent her and another medical student on a scavenger hunt with the list to see how many they could find. They could only find half of them. And that got me invited to the Board of Trustees. And when I spoke to the Board of Trustees, I said, well, we would have to hope if one of us had a cardiac arrest now, that the employee that we sent looking for the defibrillator knew where it was. And I heard from the back of the room, that's not right. I said, no, we're on the same page, that's right. And I said, the other thing we'd have to hope, seeing as though I know where the nearest defibrillator is in the cafeteria at UMass, we'd have to hope the cafeteria was open. And I hear from the other corner of the room, that's not right either. And I said, you're right. So that got me empowered to create a work group, and we set now the national standard for defibrillator signage location on a medical campus at UMass, and other places are copying us now. And the other thing that happened thank you. The other thing that happened, one of the medical students wanted to look at the defibrillators that the city of Worcester had, the public access defibrillators. And he found by assessing the defibrillators and working with the health department that we found out that half the defibrillators at that time in the city hadn't been maintained. So half of them were dead. But we fixed that. And so now the defibrillators upgraded, and they are assessed every couple of weeks to make sure everything is working, which is the way it should be with that. And the other thing is, and I owe this to the defibrillator company Zoll, I pointed out to them, I says, you know, all the data shows 97% of the population does not know what a defibrillator is or what to do with it, even if it's a public access defibrillator. So Zoll and I created guidance posters that tell people what the defibrillator is and what to do with it, calling 911, starting CPR, and putting the pads on and that. So we're in the process of offering that. We offered those posters out in Worcester City Hall and a bunch of other places throughout the city so they guide people what to do. Okay? So I think all of you should practice the CPR and go through the guidance, the poster guidance for the card. Follow those steps so you'll know. And then what I tell people to do is to take the guidance posters that are part of your handouts and put those on your refrigerator at home. That way you can use it as a refresher, but also in an emergency, you'll know where it is, so that if you actually have to do CPR or whatever with things, you have the guidance right there for you. And it's all laid out in that. Okay? All right, so we have a bunch of mannequins, and we should put them to work. And the key thing is, these mannequins I really like in the sense that when you push down on them doing CPR, if it clicks, it's telling you that you've pushed down hard enough, and that you've pushed down far enough, and then you release so that the heart can refill. That's how that works. And then you tell somebody to go get the defibrillator and bring that. And when they bring that, you keep doing CPR until the defibrillator is, pads are on, and it analyzes the rhythm. You'll stop CPR and then use the defibrillator. So one of the things I tell people too, if you're not alone, or even if you are alone and you get tired, you need to take a break for a few seconds, do that. But if you have somebody else with you, have somebody else take over for you so that we can keep the quality of the compressions as high as possible. Yes, and this one's on the left side of the chest, right? Because that way the shock will go through the heart, which is the reason for doing that. And then once the pads are on, then you turn the defibrillator on.
Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient.
And that's so that you don't interfere with the analysis.
Shock advised. Charging. Stay clear of patient. Deliver shock now. Press the orange button now.
Press the button.
Oh, I see.
Shock delivered. Begin CPR.
Be separate. You put these on. Doesn't matter left or right. I mean, it's not like there's
Right.
a difference which way it goes.
Right.
There.
There's no special orientation you gotta go.
Yeah,
No,
I think
it's
you
only
have to
that
have a
you
couple
follow the
classes on
diagram.
that.
There's this one's on the right shoulder and this one's on the left side of the chest.
Press.
Getting the click.
Now, I can hear that one, but I couldn't hear it when I was doing